I grew up Irish only on St. Patrick's Day, and that was about it. You know, I'd wear green and sing a song or two. I need a light.
Cell phones, we can light it right up.
I had a light, but
We got it.
I had a light.
There we go.
Can I borrow your phone for a few minutes? All right. Keep it. All right. Except when every once in a while my father would talk about he was in World War I, and he was, after the war was over, he went to Ireland, and he kept talking about that trip. He loved going there, but mostly he talked about the black and tan. There was something hidden in his head, I don't know what it was, but you know, that was 1919. That was before everything coalesced for the best for Ireland. But anyway, we had no known relatives in Ireland. Did I do that? But we had no known relatives in Ireland. When I was in the army in 1950 and 52, and I went over to Ireland twice, and I didn't have any relatives, so I called up my friend, my fellow Kennedy. There was an insurance man in North Albany. He was a very beloved man. He had two sons who became priests, and one son who became a Christian brother, and a daughter who graduated with me from Siena College, and Peggy. So I wrote them and I said, "Do you have any relatives in Ireland named Kennedy?" And he said yes. And so I went and I wound up in Cashel, down by the Rock of Cashel, and they treated me superbly. I stayed at their hotel, and this was in Tipperary. And they also introduced me to Irish whiskey neat in front of the fire. And there's nothing better than me. All right. My grandfather was George Kennedy, and he came over and brought half a dozen of his siblings and cousins or whatever. My father never told me anything about what his father had done to bring the family over, but they came over. And this was had to be in the 1870s, maybe early 80s. And so George met his wife, Honora Ryan, on the boat, and they got married. And they had 2 kids, my father and his sister, Mary. And then his wife died in giving birth to Mary. And so I didn't have any ancestors around. And my grandfather died in 1923. But there were others, and I just kept getting glimpses of how Irish I was from my father. He'd say, we'd go over to see Uncle Patsy in South Troy, and he'd tell us to take off our shoes because he didn't want us to wear out the shoes by walking around in them when we could walk around in our stocking feet. I thought that was a very serious attitude toward the economy. I also had my Aunt Winnie over there, Winifred Ryan, and I remember seeing her once and maybe twice, but she was very, very old when I saw her, and she raised my Aunt Mary, and anyway, that part of the family was very, very seldom talked about. But I didn't know much about my father. Never talked very much about his father. I mean, he mentioned it now and again. They grew up. There were only the two of them. They lived together, and then worked in Albany. Thank you. And they grew up, and he grew up in Wall Street, and that whole street was Irish. And Tim Fitzgerald and Johnny Dwyer and all the Dwyers and the Ryans, and I met all of these families subsequently. I met some just recently, but they're still turning up, and because I don't know why, but they didn't tell me about how Irish I was. They didn't talk about it. Why didn't they? I don't know. But anyway. My father was a dude, and he used to dress, my uncle said he dressed like Jimmy Walker, the mayor of New York. And he was considered one of the best dressed guys in Albany. And he was a singer. And I'm a singer too. I can't sing, but I will. I'm not going to sing. Well, if you want, if you. But my father, he would come home and he'd be singing it. He sang songs, and I wake up in the middle of the night, now. And I'm singing a song, I don't know where the hell I learned it. And then I remember my father used to sing that. Oregon, I want to go back to Oregon. Oregon, I want to go back to Spain. That was a World War I song. But anyway, I never knew. His father was a singer. He came by it naturally. His father was not well dressed, but my father was very well dressed. And my grandfather was he loved to sing and he loved to dance. And my father was a dancer. My father was a prize waltzer. They used to put pins in your heels when you waltz, and if you bent the pin, you lost it. told you you had to dance on your toes so you didn't bend the pin in your heels. And my father won prizes. He had loving cups of some sort. I don't know whatever happened to them. They were in my Aunt Mary's cellar, and somebody probably trashed them. Alas, my father's heels with the pins in them. And what a marvelous. Anyway, song. I would say I know hundreds of songs, and I may know 1,000. I said that to somebody, and he said, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Yes, I'm serious. I know so many songs. I don't know why I know them, but I know them because my father and so many of them are Irish. And if he had only talked to me more often, he started to talk to me one night, when he was very old. He died at 88. When living with me for 5 years, he was singing out. But before he came to live with me, he started to talk one night with a brogue, and I couldn't believe it. It was such a great brogue. I mean, he sounded just like an Irishman from Ireland, which was what he was. But I couldn't believe that he never talked to me like that. I don't know why. Why don't we send our experiences to our children? Why don't we tell everybody who comes out of our bodies what the hell, where they came from? I think that's important. Because I was this kind of figure who was singing Patty's songs on Patty's Day, but then I started to look around, and I lived in North Albany, and it was a wonderful small town, but it was so full of Irish that they called it Limerick. And my father, I looked around, and suddenly me who didn't feel very Irish at all, I was surrounded by Irish. I mean, the church was Irish. Every one of the priests was Irish. The politics, every one of the politicians were Irish. Talk about legislature. Dick Connors, who was my neighbor's one block down. I sat in front of him every Sunday at the 9:15 Mass at our church in North Albany. I could tell you the contour of the back of his head, and also his wife, and I got to know his son Mike and his daughter Peggy. They're great people, and they are traditionally supporting the Irish. But everything was Irish. I mean, it was if you look at the politics, Dan O'Connell on down, all his brothers, except, Erasmus Corning was not Irish. He was our mayor for 43 years, 11 terms, and he was Connecticut Yankee, but he was Irish by osmosis. He and Dan O'Connell ran this as an Irish town forever. Okay. anyway, I decided that I was Irish to the bone, and I liked it, and my writing took on an Irish cast, and now I am considered an Irish writer, an Irish American writer. I got some awards from the center, from Ireland, from the president of Ireland. But I just relish the fact that I have discovered how Irish I am. And I'm writing a book right now, which is about North Albany, and it's about how North Albany and those Irishmen who I know created it and made it one of the most significant cities, made Albany one of the most significant cities in the history of the United States. And then I'll rest my case on that.